Josh, if engineering were Gotham, you would most definitely be the Penguin.
Hi, yes. Welcome to Engineer vs. Designer,
The podcast.
My name is Josh, mechanical engineer and founder of SolidSmack.com.
And my name is Adam, industrial designer of CAD Junkie.com.
We've got a great show for you this week, but first, I've got to say, did last week's show actually happen? I mean,
it pretty much kicked
that
ours.
was awesome. But I talked to Al after the show, and he had something not too nice to say about Adam.
This guy's a muppet.
Each week's show is brought to you in three halves, starting with this week's digital design news, compliments of SolidSmack.com.
Followed by tips, tricks, Q&A, and a pop quiz, compliments of CADJunkie.com.
And finally, special guest Jeffrey Matthias of Housefish.com and FernLab.com weighs in on all of it.
And tells us a bit more about furniture design, mixing design and engineering knowledge, and getting a project launched on Kickstarter.
Huzzah! Cue the dorky music. Josh Mings of SolidSmack.com. The time has come for you to envelop our puny minds with your great learnedness. What have you got for us this week?
This week's SolidSmack Update is brought to you by Z Corp and their line of full-color, easy-baking, composite-spinning 3D printers. Colorful enough for rainbow vomiting unicorns and your full-color product printing needs. Get more info at zcorp.com and hit the link below for a look at improving design with 3D printing. Printastical.
Print what?
We've got stories galore for you this week. There is a lot of lame stuff, which we'll skip, and a few morsels to make the hair on the back of Adam's neck fat to stand up.
It does that sometimes.
Early last week, Autodesk announced its acquisition of Instructables, the massive DIY community where you can find how-tos on anything from making cupcake kebabs to steampunk lightsabers.
That was a good one.
That's some good stuff. The deal also sits nicely alongside Autodesk's DIY efforts by applying a creamy layer of community to their free 3D modeler 123D, aimed at the same maker crowd.
Speaking of free, PTC launched Creo Sketch, a 2D paint and line drawing program that is a free 18 megabyte download, but let's just say you get what you pay for.
Other highlights from last week, SolidSmack.com.
Shameless plug.
Launched their new site, they did. Definitely check it out.
Registration is now open for SolidWorks World 2012, taking place in beautiful San Diego, California.
GrabCAD launched a new CrowdCAD challenge, boasting a tasty $2,000 prize for the winning entry of a yacht deck vent design.
I love a good yacht deck vent.
Check that out at GrabCAD.com.
This coming week, SIGGRAPH 2011, the Computer Graphics Conference, starts up August 7th through 11th. And companies representing the CAD industry in attendance are Z Corp, 3DVIA, Bunkspeed, Luxology, Keyshot, and Autodesk.
If you're in Vancouver for SIGGRAPH, the Web3D Consortium will be the place to be.
Because X3D, the only open standard 3D format to whip that web into an interactive virtual environment, is going to be there. Folks have talked about it for years, but this is going to be interesting to see if it's really up to snuff. So here we go, guys. Let's go ahead and talk about this Autodesk Instructables acquisition. What do you guys think?
No opinion.
It really depends on where they go with it. Unfortunately, we just don't know. I mean, are they going to try to figure out how to corporatize it? Because if so,
well, obviously it's Autodesk, right? I mean, they're gonna have to do that. It's like it's such a confusing match to me. You know, we talked about an Autodesk acquisition last week, and it was another strange one. Like, I'm not sure where they're going with this other than world domination.
Yeah, they're trying to pull in a bunch of web properties. I mean, Instructables is a huge community, so they got a huge access to do all sorts of promotion. They can.
Yeah, but isn't that what's interesting about this whole thing? I mean, I just feel like Instructables is kind of the bastion of the maker community, Make Magazine, and all that crowd. And those people are the absolute opposite of the big vertically integrated corporate culture that is Autodesk. So, like, I just don't understand how these things match up other than just Autodesk wanting to clamp down on the voice of the people.
And that's what I was talking about. It depends on how badly they try to bring what they've been doing up until now into the Instructables community as opposed to the other way around. We're at a point now where technology is becoming affordable enough that, you know, all of a sudden being a designer or an engineer doesn't actually require an education or working for a big company, and that's a lot of what the maker community is about, and specifically the Instructables community.
Absolutely.
So the question is are they now trying to figure out? They just came out with what was it? Something 123D. They're
123D.
Yeah, so they're just like they give out their software to students for free. They're getting their hooks into people early so that when they want to try and move to the next step, they are already primed to be using Autodesk software. So if that's the case here, if they're just trying to, get their bug in the ear of the maker community, that's great. But if they're actually going to try and commercialize other people's work, kind of like...
I seriously doubt that. So, I mean, I guess I was kind of voicing skepticism early on, mainly for the sake of conversation. I think I see where they're going with it, or where they would say they're going with it, which is, technologically it lines up, right? This stuff, like you say, this stuff is getting easier to use and cheaper to use. A lot more people are going to be using it with things like shapeways.com to make rapid prototypes from home, all that kind of stuff. It makes a lot of sense technologically. It also makes a lot of sense, like you're saying, from a business standpoint in terms of, getting their hooks in people early, as you said. But I guess for me, the weirdest thing is just the cultural clash between the culture of the open maker community and the very closed nature of Autodesk.
I don't think there's so much a clash. I mean, people who make stuff, and Autodesk makes software for people to make stuff. I mean, it goes along.
That's true.
But and they see that this industry, this maker industry, is getting big. They're the only CAD software company that is really jumping on it.
So PTC Creo sketch. I looked at this. I kind of laughed at it. I have to be honest. As a designer looking at it, I hate to see. It's like
it looks exactly like MS Paint, and it felt. I mean, it's got the same feel, but actually, when you start messing around with it, the auto trace tool, and they have this thing called Friscuits, which is
which is the fruitiest way you can possibly say masking, which has been around since the very beginning, right? I mean, I guess so. You've had masking and masking paint since the very, very earliest days of Photoshop. You get the smoothing in your sketch lines in Illustrator, and you can import those lines to Photoshop. You can also just draw straight in Photoshop, use the Bezier curve there, paint right in. So, I mean, I guess for me, there are so many options that are better. Sketchbook Pro, Sketchbook Designer, all of these, that the Creo thing, really the only advantage I see is that it's free.
It's free, and they're using it to complement their other Creo apps.
Yeah, but exactly how does it complement them other than just being another program to have?
Not to mention, you were comparing this against Adobe products, and the fact is that if you give somebody who hasn't used an art or a sketching application since the 90s or whatever, or who has only used MS Paint,
sure.
Any of the Adobe software, it's all confusing. Whereas
That's
if you literally just want to draw a simple sketch for somebody, it's nice to have a tool outside of that. Because you're right, we most of us have MS Paint, and that's not that's sufficient, and it's free.
It rocks.
So right, well, I rock me some MS Paint as often as possible, but all right, that's the buzzer. Time's up, people. Give us 30 seconds to go put the dogs out, and we'll be right back. Welcome to the second segment of Engineer versus Designer,
the Craptastic Podcast.
Today's CAD Junkie Q&A is brought to you by an old shoe that Josh found in his yard and sold on Etsy as an oversized iPhone case.
Yep, anything can be an iPhone case.
Your ingenuity is inspiring as always. One of our most frequently asked questions on CAD Junkie is whether this Modo thing is the right choice for your CAD rendering pipeline, particularly for SolidWorks users.
Usually, the top contenders are PhotoView 360, KeyShot, and Modo, but there are enough alternatives out there to scare the pants off a guy with pants.
So today I'd like to unpack that question just a little bit.
Number one, let's just go right out and say that for 92.8% of engineers and designers, real-time rendering solutions will, 1, make them look cool, and 2, it just makes a lot of sense.
And there are tons of real-time rendering options out there. And there are standalone options like Keyshot, Autodesk Showcase, or RTT Delta Gen.
If you've got a corporate sugar daddy.
Or plugin-based solutions like Octane Render or PhotoView 360 for SolidWorks for the rest of us mere mortals.
These can give you great images with no learning curve whatsoever and make life incredibly simple if you just need to rock an image on the fly.
In this category, I am a big, hairy fan of PhotoView 360, which lets me create the images right within SolidWorks with no export necessary. The only thing that tempts me to export are things like Showcase and Delta Gen, where during the course of a presentation you can interactively fly around your model, but that's overkill for most scenarios. What do you think, Josh?
No doubt, PV360 is great if you have the premium or professional package of SolidWorks. If you or your company is a cheap and opted for the standard version, you're out of luck and either need to upgrade or look at one of the other options Adam listed. Either way, you want to consider workflow, and real-time rendering is one plus if your computer can handle it.
Okay, so number 2, real-time rendering solutions are kind of like those paper wind-up point-and-shoot cameras for $9.99 at Walgreens. They are convenient, but they don't give you much control, like a big, bulky DSLR will. But there are those of you for whom the image quality from real-time solutions just won't cut the proverbial cheese. And for those folks, you're going to have to look at computed rendering solutions, and there are too many of those to list. The big ones I see around are Modo, 3ds Max, Maya, Lightwave, and increasingly plugins like Maxwell, V-Ray, and FryRender. So for me personally, if I'm going to suffer through a long, calculated render, I'd rather have the flexibility that a standalone package like Modo gives me. Sure, there's a steep learning curve, but it is worth it. Modo, Max, and Maya all give me very similar features, but as a product designer, I tend to like Modo because of its flexibility and particularly the mouth-watering real-time preview render.
Now, as an engineer, this is a tough one for me. I like rendering in PV360, love Modo, and appreciate the ease of Keyshot. I'll have real-time rendering and all work great with SolidWorks models. PV360 for the quick while you model renderings, Modo to really amp up your options, and Keyshot for very simply fabulous looking images without going insane tweaking a million settings.
Wow, that was informative.
I learned something for myself on that one.
I'm going to start that over because you made me lose my train of thought. In about 6th grade, I went with on one of my brother's Boy Scout troops campouts. They went rafting, but I was too young to go rafting, and so I basically was forced to go check out Falling Water, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright house. And that kind of was my first experience of seeing things that were functional and just absolutely gorgeous.
So this week we had a sit down with industrial designer Jeffrey Matthias of fernlab.com.
And this guy has done it all.
But we were particularly interested in the FernLab Homebrew CNC project launching on Kickstarter this very week.
Yes, but before we talk about that, we wanted to know how he got into industrial design in the first place.
And that stuck with me. When I was in college for the first time, getting a degree in sculpture, I spent summer interning with a furniture maker. After that, I came back and all of my artwork started getting a little too functional for my professor's taste.
So he graduated with a degree in fine arts, but this furniture thing stuck with him.
He went on to get a degree in automotive technology, but always kept making furniture.
The problem with his love for furniture making was one that a lot of fine artists and craftsmen have.
Nobody can afford handmade, one-off fine art furniture.
It wasn't that the designs weren't good. Everybody loved the designs. They were just too expensive.
And that's when I started getting into figuring out how to build systems to make multiples of different objects. So
your own personal industrial revolution.
Yeah, exactly. And it was right about then that my brother's then girlfriend, now wife, introduced me to the whole concept of industrial design.
And this was a really big deal for Jeffrey.
Mixing fine art with technology was what he'd been trying to do for his entire career, but he just didn't have a name for it.
So he went back to school and got another degree, this time in industrial design.
So, I mean, how did all that lead to this FernLab project? Let's cut to the chase.
I love designing furniture. I like making prototypes, proofs of concept, and I actually don't enjoy producing furniture after that.
Right.
So when I got introduced to CNC machines, that was, the next big changer for me.
So once Jeff figured out that he could use simple CNC machines to rapidly manufacture his designs, he was hooked.
But he couldn't afford to buy his own machine.
So he designed his own. and built it.
Now, the idea of building your own CNC machine isn't all that surprising.
I'm pretty sure we've all thought about that one from time to time.
But the reality of actually doing the work of designing and building a working robot from scratch is no small feat.
So he built his machine and FernLab was born.
So, like I said, there are two parts of FernLab. There's kind of like the overall encompassing idea. It's my furniture company. It's both a place where I get to play around with design, also where I'm trying to sell design. But then the second part to it, and this is where I'm currently focusing my energy, is the CNC program.
Now, this is where FernLab is really unique.
What Jeff realized is that while building furniture quickly in his own shop was pretty cool, it's a pretty old school mentality.
Most products are built at a single centralized location.
And then shipped to retail outlets so that you and I can buy them.
This model works fairly well for things that have to be manufactured in gigantic quantities, but maybe not so well for something as bulky as furniture.
Not to mention the fact that you might want the furniture to come in custom sizes, custom colors, or with special features.
So he had an idea.
Distributed manufacturing.
The idea is simple. Design globally, manufacture locally.
And this idea could be really revolutionary. Imagine a world in which millions of small local shops are able to afford sophisticated robotic manufacturing equipment.
A file can be designed anywhere. It can be sent anywhere else in the world, and somebody in their garage who has the skill set appropriate can build that thing.
Okay, so say I lived in a tiny New York apartment, as I do at this very moment, and I decided that I wanted a new armoire for my bedroom.
You would want one of those.
But there's a very particular spot in my room where I want it. I could scour every furniture store in the city, drive to New Jersey and look for it, walk through IKEA, but there's no guaranteeing I would ever find just the right thing for that particular spot.
That and your armoire fetish is a problem.
So the idea of distributed manufacturing is that I go to a website, say fernlab.com for example, and I find a design that I really like. The idea is that eventually I could custom configure all the dimensions, colors, special features of that armoire so that it fits my little New York apartment snug as a bug.
Oh. The plans are then beamed through the sky over to a local furniture shop near you, where the parts are machined specifically for you, using industry standard equipment, so all you have to do is go pick it up.
Now what's so cool about that is that it brings the relationship back into manufacturing, so that if the shop manager has a question for you about the product, or about delivery details or what have you, they just call you right up and talk to you on the phone. And when you go back and pick up the furniture, you get to see the shop and shake the hand of the guy who made it.
Yeah, and I get you. Yeah, you get factory level accuracy from a local manufacturer. And on top of that, during the process, you even potentially, like you said, I like that, if they have a question or if you want to go see the thing being made, there's, people feel a much stronger connection to a product when they witnessed that specific product's birth. And you can't do that when you're, cranking out hundreds of thousands of things.
Your Kickstarter venture is launching any day now. What advice do you have for people interested in getting their own project funded?
I've got two things. One is really simple, especially if you're going through Kickstarter, but whatever platform like that you're going through. Set up your project right away and throw in sample text, try and format it, throw up a sample video, see what it does with it, because I've discovered there's just some odd limitations to the Kickstarter platform.
Okay, so do a beta test before you do the real thing.
Absolutely. But the other thing, and this is specific to my project, don't be a perfectionist. I've been working on this project since, I don't know, February or something like that. Josh can back me up. I've been talking about it for way too long. And that's just dumb. So focus on the aspects that you're good at and what's important about your project. And if you're passionate, the rest of it's going to work out. You don't need to have every aspect of it. Nobody's looking for a commercial quality pitch, which, I think is where I kind of was trying to go with things. Nobody's looking for that. What they're looking for is somebody who conveys a sense of capability and passion.
Hey Jeffrey, so you're a designer by trade, but with this FernLab project and other stuff you do, all the build and stuff, you're really bringing engineering together with design. Why is that so important to have the knowledge of each?
Because I never learned where the separation is. I'd get bored if I approached a problem from just one angle. I guess industrial designers are often thought as just making things look pretty, whereas the designers make them functional. And I've never been able to focus on just one of those aspects. My best designs, and I think the best designs out there in general, are the ones that balance design and manufacturability.
Well, and not even to balance. I mean, they're really one and the same thing, right?
Yeah, so like one of the coffee tables I have, the cutoff from the tabletop becomes the legs. It was, hey, a sheet of MDF is $20. Get me 4 tables out of one sheet. You know, I leaned towards a Danish modern design with it, and I was able to get 4 tables out of one sheet. Now, mind you, they're low tables. It's a coffee table, I should mention, not like a dining table. I'd be really sweet if I could pull that off. I try to design around processes that most people can do.
Jeff, it's been so inspiring to talk to you, and I'm sorry to say that our time is up.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Be sure to check out his Kickstarter project when it launches.
And to all of you out there in designer and engineer land, your ears have successfully taken another beating. Thanks for listening and convincing us to keep this thing going.
Thank you indeed, and we did value those comments on the last show, so chime in on EngineerVsDesigner.com and tell us what you think.
And if your earbuds have melted into your ears with overwhelming excitement during the show, be sure to like us, +1 us, tweet us, or whatever else us.
Special thanks to Ross Hartman for the sweet musical sounds you have been hearing. Show him some love at rosshartman.com.
We'll see you next week, and remember, without engineers, designers would be knitting doilies.
And without designers, engineers would be wearing doilies.
Yeah, whatever. Out of here.
Until next time.